So I'm using Pascal case for process and move files over, but either camel or snake case for work right below it. Oops, I guess I am not consistent in my naming scheme. Hello, and welcome to Senior Code Review Buddy. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to talk about the importance of style guides and being consistent in your code, even if you are the only developer for the repo. When working on code with other people, I think it's really clear why we want to follow a style guide. By having a consistent style, the code will have a more consistent feel that will make it easier to read and understand overall. And the naming convention of a style guide is probably one of the most important parts. By ensuring everyone follows the same naming convention, you make it easy to know when reading the code what are the variables, classes, modules, constants, or functions. If everyone has a different style, it could be really tricky to read the code, as you might not be able to tell the difference between a function call and a constructor. But that's just because there are multiple people, right? If you're working by yourself, there's no need for a style guide, as you'll totally be consistent, right? While I've used formatters like black and rough for my code to automatically format it, I've generally not bothered turning on the style checks around naming. I'm the only one making changes in these private repos, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to be consistent. But what made me revisit this concept was a comment from someone on a previous video I'd made, where I was sharing some code from a podcast app I've been working on for years. They asked why I was using Pascal case for my functions, as at a glance, they assumed the function references were referring to classes or type definitions. I responded by saying this was just the style guide I was following for the repo. At the time I started my podcast project, I was following the Google style guide at work, so I figured I'd just use it for this project as well. And so I used Pascal case for my function names, because that's what the style guide said. And after I responded to that question, I figured I was done with the issue. But then I started thinking, maybe I should add a naming check to my repo, so I can then talk about how it's a good thing for teams to do. And after thinking about it for a while, I decided to do that. And my first step was to find a tool to enforce the Google Python style guide. And I ran into trouble right away. I looked at a few different tools, but none of them seemed to have the right naming convention. Since the Google Python style guide is pretty well used, I figured there had to be a tool for it somewhere. But all the tools I found seemed wrong. And then I realized these tools were saying they were compliant with the Google Python style guide, which seemed wrong. But then I went to the Google Python style guide and realized it was not what I remembered. And in fact, I don't think I had even been following the old version. The older versions of the Google style guide seem to 404 now, but I did find an old copy, I think, of it somewhere else. And looking at it, it said functions should be camel case, not Pascal case. And the new guidelines said they should be snake case. And I'd been using Pascal case, which didn't match the old or the new convention. While I'm not sure how I got it so wrong, this was enough information for me to decide that I should start enforcing the Google Python naming convention. It would help ensure that I stayed consistent and was consistent with a well-known style guide. So I added rough to enforcing the naming conventions, and when I first ran it, it detected 196 errors, and 187 of those were related to function names. The process of fixing things, though, was pretty straightforward. My first two PRs just added the rough naming check, and I manually fixed all the non-function naming errors. And now for the remaining 187 errors to fix. Well, as I looked at them, I realized I had even more issues following my naming convention than I thought. I realized that I had some snake case functions, not a lot, but a handful, like these. I also had some test function names that I found helpful. They were very non-standard. They were mostly Pascal case, but with underscores to break up various parts. Like this. I really should have enforced a naming convention long ago. Now, even though 187 functions to rename is a lot, the actual process to fix it was pretty straightforward. I wrote a small script to make the changes for me. I basically just used a regex to collect all the function names, figured out what the new name should be, and then did string replacements. And it mostly worked. There were a few small issues, like realizing the unit test library has function names that need to be camel case, like setup and teardown, but this script saved me a bunch of time, and I felt more confident than making the change that many times manually. I also have a fair amount of confidence in my test code coverage for this repo, so I figured if I broke something, one of the tests was going to fail. So in the end, turning on a naming pre-commit check not only helped me have my repo follow a well-known style guide, but it humbled me by making me realize that I wasn't following the style guide I thought I was, I had never been following that style guide, and I wasn't even following the weird style that I thought I was following. And if I can make all these mistakes as the only developer on a team, I hope you can see why having a pre-commit check for repos with more than one developers should be a slam dunk thing to do. And maybe why it's worth enabling this check for a repo you work on alone to help you be consistent and make things easy if you ever start getting PRs from other devs. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing. If you have any comments, code you'd like me to review, or ideas you'd like me to talk about, please leave a comment below or reach me at chris@seniorcodereviewbuddy.com. Thanks, and have a great day.